Holy folly, you are God living in her own dream. Welcome to a Mystic's Journal. You can call me Agape from Love Has One Mystery School. And in these videos, I share insights and updates that I enjoy sharing, but also they may be of benefit to you as well. First thing to share is that if you are a pure channel of love, you actually become prone to a lot of attacks from egos. Because on the one hand, egos are trying to prove that unconditional love doesn't exist. So the very existence of an ego relies on the belief that love is not all there is. So if you're being a pure channel of unconditional love, you're basically showing in a big way to the ego right in front of it, I'm unconditional love, and love is right here in front of you. And so the ego is trying to goad you and tease you into becoming something that isn't love. So try and trigger you to get angry, to do something that's not loving, so that it can then use it as proof. Oh, but love isn't here. You are not love because you've said this or you've done this. So that's a clever thing the ego is doing. But at the same time, if you are unconditional love, then the ego is like, well, I can then attack you and you will love me anyway. You know, like how a lot of children behave around their parents. They feel they can just attack and the parents will still love them. That's what unconditional love is. So either way, the ego feels like it can benefit in some way from attacking you. Either you will continue loving it. It almost takes that as it has power over you, where it can attack you and yet you still love it. But if you do react with anything other than love, then the ego uses it as backup for its belief that love is not all there is. So the ego is always trying to attack in order to try and get something from you as a pure channel of love. But a pure channel of love will never give the ego what it wants. So unconditionally loving someone, despite them attacking you, doesn't mean you let them just walk all over you, you do what they say and so on. Sometimes it means unconditionally loving them, but from a distance. Because you always have something that the ego wants. The ego wants attention. It wants to suck your energy. So you always have a tool in your toolbox as a pure channel of love where you can withdraw your attention. You can withdraw your energy. Not necessarily withdrawing love, you can just love from a distance. But the ego doesn't like that. So that's the way to win that game as a pure channel of love. You just withdraw your attention and unconditionally love from a distance. That way the ego loses that game and gives it an opportunity to realize, oh, there is actually a consequence to my attacks, to my actions that don't benefit me, that actually hurt me in some way. Not because you've withdrawn love, but because you've withdrawn attention, because you've withdrawn a closer relationship. The second thing to share is how, out of acting on fear, you create the very situation that you were fearing. So I'll give 3 examples of this, okay? So if you fear something and then you put certain actions or measures in place to try and stop what you're fearing from ever happening, those very controls and measures end up creating the very situation that you feared. So one example is disease. So there are organizations around the world that whose purpose is to create all these diseases that aren't already real so that they can have the antidote, the vaccine, the countermeasure to those diseases if they ever were created. But as we have seen, those very same organizations created certain viruses and let them out of their lab, out of their organization, and created a big issue around the world, creating the very disease that they were supposedly trying to protect us from. So that's one example. Another example is if one country is fearing another country that they might attack in the future, the country out of that fear builds up its army, builds up its defenses. But then the other country that they were fearing sees that this country is building up its defenses, its army, and then it starts thinking, well, why are they building their defenses? Why are they building their army? Are they about to attack us? So that very country also builds up its army and defenses. And you have this building up of tension because everyone's fearing the other person and trying to put measures in place to make sure what they fear doesn't happen. And in the end, this kind of thing actually results in war, the very thing that just out of fear of war, it puts into motion all these actions that actually lead to war itself. And the third example is that if you fear being alone, you become very needy. You attach to people in your life. But that very neediness, that attachment actually drives people away. And so out of acting on fear of being alone, you actually do things that actually repel people so that you are left alone. So with those few examples, you can see how if you act on fear, you create the very situation that you're fearing. The third and final thing to share in this particular video is separation is actually also used as a defense mechanism within people. So you can imagine all these people with all their thoughts, all their emotions, as a way for you to try to not think the same thoughts as another person, or because you don't want to feel how they feel, you don't want their emotions. You solidify this belief in separation to try and distance yourself from those other people that you don't want to be connected to through your mind or through your emotions, because you just don't want to feel them. You don't want to take responsibility for them. Now, if that belief in separation didn't exist, you would think everyone's thoughts, you would feel everyone's emotions, and so you'd be responsible in dealing with those things, in counteracting them, using certain tools. But as a way to not be responsible for other people, and as a way to not feel their emotions and think their thoughts, you believe in separation, and that distances yourself somewhat from others, seemingly. But in reality, we are still connected, but it's a way to reduce the effect of that connection as much as possible. So 3 interesting nuggets in this particular video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions you'd like to ask me or comments, then please just leave a message in the comments below and I will reply to it. That's all for today. Yours joygasmically, Agape.